And I feel like I'm about to step into it. I'm about to become very adequate and ask you guys to play a really silly game. But I insist. I greatly insist because I keep my pulse to some of the other Detroit media out there, and I don't think some people are as positive as us. And look, I get it, especially when you boil it down to it. This is a 3-win Lions team. And there's been plenty of times where even Jeremy, I know you've kind of questioned some of the performances that have come out of this team. So I guess the big question is, if I make this binary, if I make this black and white, even if you only lean one way, but you have to use the word, was this season a success or a failure? I don't care for your criteria. You can explain your criteria to set it if you want, but I want you to use the word. I don't want you to weasel out of the word. I want you to use the word. I want you to stick to it. I am being very embrace debate here. I am asking you to pick a side. And I know that is antithetical to PODcast, where we just don't do that. But I feel like it's a great experiment in trying to understand maybe where these perceptions differ and trying to explain to people why we are so positive about some elements and why we're so negative about other elements and where we place those emphases. So I've teed it off long enough. Jeremy, was this season a success or a failure? Floor is yours.
Unequivocally a success. How's that for taking a side?
Okay.
Unequivocally a success.
Okay.
Because I remember at the very beginning of the year, what did we want? Did we want this team to compete for a playoff? No, that wasn't realistic. Did we want this team to, be the number one defense or whatever? No. The one thing that we wanted was to see this team improve. We wanted this team to play better in December and January than they did in September. And there is absolutely no question that they did. Absolutely no question that they did. Jared Goff went 3-1 in his last 4 starts. This team went 3-3 at the end of the season. 2 of those were starts by Tim Boyle, his second and third career start, where he clearly isn't ready to be a starting quarterback. And these wins aren't coming against scrub teams. Maybe yes, Packers backups in the second half. Cardinals, not a scrub team. Vikings, not a scrub team. These weren't easy clean them up wins. And yes, there were some blowouts along the way. There were some recent blowouts. Can you imagine had the season ended last week and just like the lack of positive vibes going into the offseason? I'm not one to talk about year-to-year momentum, but from a fan standpoint, finishing the season the way that they did over finishing last week, miles of difference. And is that a little irrational? Sure. One game shouldn't change how you feel about this team's future that much. But with the offense improving a bunch, with the defense dealing with all the injuries that they did, and the coaching staff getting as much love as they did, and the progression of players like Charles Harris and Tracy Walker and Amani Oruwariye, we saw individual improvement. We saw group improvement, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I honestly don't know what you can ask for. And the cherry on top is this team gets a top 2 draft pick despite going on a run towards the end of the season. You get your cake and you get to eat it too. This was unequivocally a successful season for Dan Campbell in year 1. And if people want to just point to 13-1 and be like, how can you call that a success? Get out of here. Context matters. And the context here is that the Lions are improving. The Lions, and maybe most important of all, like the culture. And I hate to be the guy who talks about something that's not tangential. It's not physical. But this team went through hell this season. Went through hell. In terms of injuries, in terms of heartbreaking losses. This team was 10-1 at one point? And they go on a roll with guys that might not ever start a football game again. That means something. And for them to go through all of that and everyone sing this coaching staff's praises and front office praises and all that, I'm stoked. I'm stoked about 2022. I can't wait for the season to start. Season just ended. I can't wait for the season to start.
Yeah. You want me to answer the same question, Chris?
Yeah. No, it's a round table. You get your shot now.
Okay. Well, I want to start with some of the minute successes, and I think things that probably they'll probably get swept under the rug in due time. But some of the smaller successes that I feel like don't seem like much of a success in the grand scheme of things is the Lions have their guy, like they have their head coach, and
That's minor.
it's no.
Oh.
I think it's minor in the sense to say like, oh, the Lions don't have to worry about hitting reset again, or like they don't have to be in this situation where, I mean, imagine being a Houston Texans fan right now, like you getting a coach who'd be one and done. I mean, that's awful. I mean, that sets your franchise back years and years and years. It's so refreshing to know that I think the Lions have a guy who, provided he wants to be the head coach of the Detroit Lions, is a guy who will be around for a very long time. And that seems like a small success in the immediate because of a record that says like 3-13-1. And, you know, like you said, Jeremy, starting that season off with, you know, being the only winless team in the NFL, still trying to get a win, and they end up getting a tie. And it seems like they continue to be like the kind of just the horse that everybody kicks. But by halftime of this game, there were like national media people that were like, finally, oh, the Lions are fun. Oh, like the Lions are bad, but they're really cool to watch. Or
I think it helped that this game was on, like, for whatever reason, was on a lot of the Fox early across the country.
Yeah.
Too.
So yeah, it's all over people's television screens. But like, this is when like the perception starts to change, right? Like when the like, for as much as we want to say like always tune into your local media if you want to figure out like the pulse of a team, like, I mean, that national media stuff, players consume that. And like that's going to be the next step in making this, you know, taking this from being a success, a step in the right direction, to like now we're walking, right? And it's going to be getting players through the door and getting good talent. But I'm with Jeremy in the fact that like this is a huge success because there was a really good article from Kevin Clark from The Ringer, and he wrote about how like NFL teams have a serious problem in hiring the right head coaches and general managers, and all the mistakes that those organizations make. And Clark bumped into he didn't name him, but into an owner of a successful NFL team at a league event, and he said they got to talking, and that league owner, or that team owner, said that he was starting to believe that the only sustainable competitive advantage in football was culture, and that everything else can be replicated or figured out, but like culture cannot, because it's super hard to build. The Lions are building, man.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes, and we're even guilty of it here too, especially during Patricia in those years where we were saying that, well, culture is only, you only get culture if you're winning. I think we were a little too reductive at that point. Do you agree, Jeremy, before I get to mine? Or,
sure. Yeah.
Because I mean, I think if there's one lesson I've taken away from this year, it's like culture isn't just if you're winning. It helps probably speed it along, but there's nothing to say that this team has culture and it has survived a lot of losing.
And just one thing I want to mention before we get to your point is this kind of national perception of the Lions is kind of like, I know the Lions went 0-10-1, but it's not like they weren't competitive at the beginning of the season too. Like there were people, you know, after they almost came back against the 49ers, the next week they play a really good first half against the Packers. Then the following week is the Ravens. Like there were flashes all season. Now they're certainly more consistent now than they were, and that's where the growth is. But this team was kind of competitive right out of the gate too. So not to like trash on the first half of the season either. Like Lions have been consistently competitive with an uncompetitive roster, and that matters.
They had writers putting them like in the 20s in their power rankings, even though they didn't
as a winless team.
Yeah.
And again, we started the year with most people simming the Lions to like first overall pick.
Like, they were pretty close.
No, I know they're pretty close, but I'm just saying like those people are still kind of right on the money. But I think, and this is maybe going to segue into mine, but just as a preamble to mine, I think some Lions fans underestimated how bad this roster was going into this year. Go before Campbell and Holmes even got their hands on it. This was a really bad roster. This was an incredibly bad roster, and Stafford being here masked a lot of those problems, man.
There was I don't know if you saw the graphic during the game, Chris, but there was something they threw up about Since 2017, only 55% of the players that the Lions have drafted are on NFL rosters.
I've done the
Like
rant before, man.
It was
Yeah.
the third worst in the NFL over that span.
It matters, and we talked about it during the Patricia years too. When you start driving away players, then you try to draft their replacements, and you flail and swing and miss on those drafts, and then suddenly you're sinking a lot of salary cap money into getting the replacements, and those guys aren't doing well either. And it's just it's a feedback loop that just cripples your organization, and that's what the Lions have had to crawl out from.
The last point I want to make about how improved this team is and why I think it's a consensus success here is we have to talk about the coaching staff too, because this was very much a learning year for a lot of these guys. It was Dan Campbell's first full season as a head coach, last 8 games as a play caller, and we saw him grow there. We saw some early mistakes, right? With whether it's double timeout or he even mentioned it. Like, he said he made mistakes. He was kind of swimming in it early on because he didn't know how to properly manage his time during the game when he's calling plays and spinning plates out there trying to do everything. And he got into a groove in the second half of the season and figured out. Aaron Glenn, first year as a defensive coordinator. I feel like we forget that. First year as a defensive coordinator, as much as we praise the guy, he made some early mistakes, right? We hammered him for some of the play calling early in the season when 3-man rushes late in the game that allowed the Ravens to come back, that allowed the Vikings to come back. They got better.
And Jeremy, to that point, one of my favorite things about what the defense did today is when it was, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, it was we're sending 5-6 guys.
They were
and
so much more aggressive.
We're gonna make you throw the ball quick. And then we're gonna say your guy has to beat our guy, and that happened a couple of times. But
sure,
that's the right way to approach that.
I don't know how many they rushed on that final play of the game, but it was pressure that won them that football game.
Yeah,
pressure in Jordan Love's face that had him overthrow the ball right into Tracy Walker's hands. He learned, and the players are learning new schemes, and they're going to come back and they're going to hit the ground running next year. They are. They don't have to relearn everything. And sure, there's going to be a fair amount of roster overturn where there are going to be guys that have to learn the new scheme. But Dan Campbell's going to hit the ground running as an offensive player caller, I think. I think that's the most likely scenario. And Aaron Glenn took his lumps this year and learned too. And so as long as he stays around and who knows if that's going to happen or not, but I don't know, man. Like, I don't know how you look at the season as a whole and say, I don't know if this team is headed in the right direction. I'm not right. Guaranteeing anything, but man, it's like I said, let's fast forward the offseason. Let's get to September already.
Sim. I'm going to finally get to mine here.
I'm sorry.
Just no. That's good because I wanted that kind of conversation there. I'm not, that's not me busting your balls. And I'm glad you guys are doing it because I'm like trying to hold back some coughs here now too. I think I'm gonna go for the clean sweep, and I'll say it's a success. I won't say it's rousing, but it is definitely. I'm saying it's a success. I'm going to use that word. I think you mentioned the national media, and you see the national media praising them, but I think the disconnect is now a lot of the local fans and a lot of the local media has kind of turned against the Lions in a lot of ways because of the losing. But I would posit and say that those fans, it's been a really long time since they've seen a proper rebuild. We've talked about this before. Proper rebuild, that's a hard word to use to the Lions, who have put up like 4-win seasons, and I wouldn't even call that a rebuild, just an incredibly underperforming year under Jim Schwartz or Matt Patricia. But that wasn't a rebuilding year because you still had the core there. Your goal out of that gate was to win the division, or to get to the playoffs, or to get a wild card. The last actual rebuilding years are probably 2007, 2008, maybe a little bit of 2009 as part of that project. So we're talking over 10, 11, 12 years ago since you've seen that. I think some of them forgot what it feels like. And I think some of them don't realize that kind of hard work when your roster is just firebombed. This roster, and I said it earlier, this roster is firebombed. This roster was not good. This roster, You mentioned earlier, Jeremy, you don't think some of these guys are going to be playing for an NFL team again. I mean, it's hard to argue against it. And look what look what some of these coaches got out of them. And the big thing is we talked about it, it's the culture. You want that culture around, and what that culture translates into is exactly the big question. And it's the big question because I saw this being argued on Twitter the other day. People want to come to play for Dan Campbell. Like, guys want to play for Dan Campbell. I don't know if it draws guys. They're like, "Ooh, I want to leave my team to go play for them." Like they're like some fucking so there's some anti-Joe Judge type of creature where it's like they want to come there. But you find me one guy who wants to bail on Dan Campbell. I dare you, find me one guy who wants to bail on Dan Campbell, who maybe you can find one who is maybe a holdover from the style of Matt Patricia, but you can't find that guy. You can't. You want to know why? Because guys want to play, because guys like how Dan Campbell coaches. He's not a meathead. He's incredibly intelligent. He's incredibly emotional. He's incredibly empathetic. And like, man, this is the antithesis of the Belichick Saban style of coaching. I'm not going to say it's as successful as that just yet. We still need to have that roll in, but it's night and day to that. I mean, and Belichick privately is kind of a nicer person, but like still everyone in the media valorizes this idea of the hard-nosed above the board coach who's very smart in X's and O's. And Dan Campbell does not come off that way. He comes off as a lot more of an emotional creature. I think that creates the culture shock, but the results speak for themselves. Maybe not in the wins, but again, you win with the talent on the field. The Lions don't have a lot of talent on the field, but they've definitely shown you that they have a foundation on which to build on. And like, look, I'm not happy with 3 wins. I can say that, but I don't think the Lions are happy with 3 wins either, but they're at least committed to being, but at least the commitment at the end of the year isn't everyone gathers up their resume and gets ready to head out the door. The commitment is, we want to be back here and build upon this. And you've seen that come out in pieces like Amon-Ra St. Brown, the growth of Jared Goff. You've had these questions that we've had answered, and some of those didn't work out in your favor. I don't know if Anthony Lynn's sticking around, but it's maybe for the best. It's maybe for the best if that doesn't happen, just seeing the way that the play calling's gone a little bit. So yeah, I am going to say success. We'll make it a clean sweep.
From everything that you and you and Jeremy have said, Chris, the one thing I want to add is that I think we did a little bit of like talking ourselves into Matt Patricia after Bob Quinn hired him, and after that first season, and
it was all about giving him time. He needs to implement his system, right?
When the boat started to rock, when it was Darius Slay and when it was Quandre Diggs, it was okay. Well, maybe it's all about getting his players. Maybe it's all about getting his players. But then when it wasn't just Darius Slay, or when it wasn't just Quandre Diggs, it was okay. Like, the difference between the feeling here and the feeling back then is that Matt Patricia like deceived people by hiding under the guise of, well, it needs to be my personnel and my kind of players. Once I get Trey Flowers, once I get Justin Coleman, that happens. If Dan Campbell is nothing else, it seems like the most honest person that I've seen be a head coach in a long time. So that's why 3 wins feels like a success this year, is because it feels like he's going to bring in the right players.
And by the way, I wouldn't just limit that to Matt Patricia. I don't think other former coaches were as much as a-holes as Patricia, but I don't know if the culture was great under Jim Caldwell. I mean, it was definitely more stable. It was more calm. You saw guys wanting to play for him, but there were definitely guys not feeling Detroit at the time. I know some former players who played under Jim Caldwell who, like, even though they came to Detroit, took a free agent contract to come to Detroit, they still, after leaving Detroit, immediately start bad-mouthing the organization.
Right.
That matters. And you can't tell me the culture was good under Jim Schwartz either. We saw enough blow-ups and, high-profile leavings to say that culture wasn't good either. So it does matter. It does matter, because if you're a team that is going to have to lose a lot, you need the buy-in.
And the interesting thing, I feel like with a lot of coaching staffs, you talk about, oh, they need their guys. whether it's a scheme fit, whether it's an attitude fit. Do you really feel like there is a strict profile for a Dan Campbell guy?
There's one guy, Jeremy, and the reason why it makes me laugh is because they need a really good pass blocking tight end too. Like that's the kind of player
that's the only key to success. But otherwise it's like
the hardworking guy. That's all you have to be if you want to be
someone who wants to play football. That's
Jamal Williams. You need a Jamal Williams. Yeah.
But I think the answer is just like anybody. Anybody who wants to play this football game is a good fit under Dan Campbell right now because they'll find out a way to use him. And Amon-Ra is like the perfect example. Guy that absolutely loves the game, may not have been like a complete stylistic fit of what we thought the Lions were going to do, but by the end of the season,
even personality-wise,
they found a way to fit him in this offense and make him a feature. And that, to me, a guy who isn't like this big, speedy guy that we're all like, oh, Anthony Lynn loves his big, speedy receivers that can be a downfield threat. This offense needs that for Jared Goff to be successful. No, they went out and got a guy who they knew absolutely loved football and worked his ass off, and that's it. That's all they needed, and they're like, give us a half a season to figure out where we're going to use you, and they did. They found a way, and man,
it's heterodox. It's heterodox. I'm going to use the big word. It's heterodox. It's flexible. It doesn't conform. It doesn't need to. They will take what they can get, and they will be able to, and they will try to make it work. And that kind of flexibility is something that you need in football. I feel like that orthodox strategy that Patricia did. Again, the problem is if you strike out and miss, you are in a deep hole that you are not climbing out of. We're trying to climb out of the hole.
We are going to be on this podcast in 5 months from now, and the Detroit Lions are going to be a chic NFC North winner pick. That I promise you. Nationally speaking, we're already starting to get some buzz. And if Aaron Rodgers isn't around,
I was going to say that's the only caveat.
Aaron Rodgers might not be around. The other two teams might be dealing with new head coaches. The Lions are going to be a chic NFC North winner pick next year.
Like the Vikings, the Vikings are going to have to do the total rebuild, and the Bears are at the end of the lifespan of their defense.
Yeah.
And it's not just going to be like, hey, you'll clean up a really kind of mediocre NFC North. I think it will be like, this is going to be a young, hungry team who wants to prove something.
I'm excited to see more Jordan Love.